Salweta everyone, and welcome to stage 24. In this stage we're going to have a whole lot of fun because we get not one but two new sets of verb endings. So here are the first ones. Just to recap, make sure that you are up to date with what you should know. We know that all verbs must have person, which means who's doing the verb, number, which means how many people are doing the verb, and tense, which means when it's being done. They also have what's known as a mood. This tells us more about the circumstances of a verb, and we've actually met two of them already, we just didn't know what they were. So the first mood that you've been translating right since stage 1 is the indicative, which basically means it's normal. It refers to facts and clear statements that are true. The imperative is used to give orders. You remember that that ends in a vowel, and it's used to do things like study, don't game, love Latin, and so on. The third mood, which we meet in stage 24, is the subjunctive, and this is used to suggest more than just a mere fact. It adds extra information or suggests doubt. We also need to recap the idea of clauses, and we met these when we learned about relative clauses back in the Blue Book. So a clause is a part of a sentence which contains a verb. Each sentence must have a main clause which makes sense on its own, and it contains the main verb of the sentence. You can then add in subordinate clauses to give us further information and make our sentences more interesting. So if we have a look at some examples, I've put the subordinate clauses in bold. So Latin, which is my favourite subject, makes me happy. Latin makes me happy makes sense on its own, but we're embellishing on it with a relative clause here. When I had finished my homework, I did some extra study. Notice that when I had finished my homework doesn't make sense on its own. We need to add this to the main clause to make it make sense. And finally, I do not game in class because learning is more fun. Again, the subordinate clause in bold gives us more information about the main clause. In stage 24, we're going to meet a new kind of subordinate clause, and this has the pluperfect subjunctive in it. So here we have our first example, cum rex exercit, salvius milites ad se vocavit. The main clause is the bit that's not in bold. Salvius called the soldiers to himself. But when we have the word cum meaning when, it's a subordinate clause, and we need to add in this extra phrase, when the king had gone out. So that exercit is a pluperfect, and it's subjunctive. Another example, sorores cum culinam intravescent pocula sordida lavare coeperunt. The sisters, when they had entered the kitchen, began to wash the dirty cups. And you'll notice that the word intravescent looks new and different. So these ones that we are learning about today are pluperfect subjunctives. So we already know that because they are pluperfect, we translate them as had something. If this isn't making sense, you're going to need to go back to the verb tutorial video to recap what a pluperfect is. It indicates something that happened further back in time. The subjunctive is the mood of verb that's used in particular subordinate clauses, like one starting with cum. So these words look slightly different, but luckily they're quite easy to recognize. So to form the pluperfect subjunctive, we need to take the third part of the verb as our stem. So remember, your vocab is listed, or your verbs are listed like this: amo, I love; amare, to love; amawi, I loved. It's the perfect tense, and amatum, having been loved. So we need to take that third one, amawi, remove the ending I, and then add on these endings for the pluperfect subjunctive. So for I had done something, asem, so amawasem means I had loved. Esays, for you had loved, amawasays. Aset, example, amawaset, meaning he or she or it had loved. Asamos, amawasamos means we had loved. Asatus, becoming amawasatus, you all had loved. And assent, for they had something. So notice that these are really easy to recognize. We've got that ISSE in them, so they stand out, and you just need to remember that that means had. other than that, we've seen the MST list as NT before, so you can recognise who exactly had done something. So the key points to take away from this video are, number one, the concept of mood tells us more about the circumstances of a verb. And a subordinate clause is used to add extra information to the main clause in a sentence. In some subordinate clauses, for example, when cum means when, we need to use a pluperfect subjunctive. We recognise this by the ISSE near the end, and we always translate it as had something. There we go.